There's a lot of discussion today about cremation. So let's say you've decided you want to be burned up when you die. Cremation is a hot topic. Sorry, I just had to say that. There are a couple of things I like about cremation. So let me give you some fuel for your fire. Sorry about that too. But this is a personal story, and it's something that I think all of us should think about if we're going to have a cremation. My father died some years ago at the age of 70, heart failure. He knew he was dying and leaned on my mother throughout the ordeal. My mother is of German descent and a very strong, independent woman. She did not cry at my father's funeral and seemed to be a tower of strength. At one point, she came to me and said, "Son, I know I'm supposed to cry, but I don't feel I need to. Your father and I discussed his death, and I have accepted it." There was not much I could say, but I did have my doubts. Sure enough, 6 weeks after my mother's death, my mother...
After my father's death.
Yeah, can we do that? Tell me when you're ready, Mike. Sure enough, 6 weeks after my dad's death, my mother called my office, and it was an afternoon that I had a full slate of appointments. But she asked the receptionist to interrupt my counseling session because she needed to talk to me now. When I picked up the phone, she was crying uncontrollably and said, "John, you're going to have to admit me to the hospital. I can't stop crying. I want to go over to the cemetery and dig your father up and hug him one more time." My heart was in my throat. I spent the next 30 minutes calming her down, normalizing her feelings, giving her permission to cry, and assisting her in developing a plan of action to accept my father's death. But here's the real story. My mother said something in that conversation that troubled me. She told me that my father looked so natural in the casket that she wondered if he was really dead. While this was a compliment to the funeral director that prepared my father's body, it was very unsettling to my mother. Later, when she was beginning to heal emotionally, she said she had struggled with seeing in her mind my father in the casket, underground, alone, and trying to breathe. For my mother, an open casket funeral had contributed very little toward her acceptance of my father's death. Would her acceptance have been easier if my father had been cremated? I'm not sure, except to say the chances of a mourner accepting the finality of death within a few days after the loss seems to be greater with the destructive nature of fire than with a natural-looking prepared body in a casket. There's something else I like about cremation. And let me tell you another story that's not so personal. Ed was 72 years old and a retired college professor of 5 years. He was just beginning to enjoy his grandchildren when he was diagnosed with inoperable liver cancer. The oncologist gave him 6 months to live. He meticulously planned his funeral, right up to the point of sitting down with his entire family and explaining every detail. Here was his plan. After his death, he wanted his family to spend some time with his body, at home, the hospital, or the funeral home. Wherever his body was, he wanted his family there. He wanted to be cremated within 24 hours. He wanted his sons to witness the cremation. His ashes were to be placed in an urn and given to his wife. 1 week after his death, there was to be a memorial service at the Presbyterian Church. His ashes and urn were to be placed on the communion table in the front of the church. There were other details for the service the family was to follow. After the service, his wife was to keep the urn on the mantle in the living room for 1 year. After 1 year, there was to be a short memorial service at the cottage in northern Michigan, and his ashes sprinkled around the tall oak tree in the back of the yard. Everybody in the family followed the plan without question, except his 6-year-old granddaughter, who asked, "Why are you burning your body, Papa?" Although I would not recommend Ed's response, especially to a 6-year-old, I did find it intriguing. He said, "Honey, do you like worms crawling on your body?" She screamed, "No!" Well, when you're buried in a casket, eventually over time, the body is exposed to air and moisture, which has in it tiny bugs and worms. These little bugs and worms attach themselves to the body and begin to eat it. We call this process decay. And after a long time, the decayed body becomes dirt. Now, I can have the same thing done in a couple of hours by burning my body, and I don't have those pesky bugs and worms all over me. I guess I had told it like it is, whether his granddaughter could understand it or not. His idea was cremation is a quick sanitary disposal of the body that prohibits the slow process of decomposition and in turn makes the survivor or survivors feel better. Also, I think Ed found some comfort in having his body reduced to its natural elements and then mixed with the elements of earth. Whether I agree with Ed or not, he does have a point. But the thing I liked the most about Ed was he thought and talked about death, his death. That is something you need to do, and please do it now.